part of our story right now that I think is misunderstood is that everybody kind of sees us as a farm first. In reality, we're an education organization, and we're, this interpretive center on the Lower American River. I mean, we're the last working farm on the Lower American River in the capital of California, which is, we're permanently protected and we're going to be here forever. And if that's not worth saving, particularly in the face of, environmental crisis and health and wellness issues and sense of community, and an organization like what we're doing really holds, in my opinion, a lot of things together.
Hi, I'm Jeff Holden. Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. Our purpose and passion is to highlight a nonprofit organization in each weekly episode, giving that organization an opportunity to tell their story in their words to better inform and educate the respective communities they serve, as well as provide one more tool for them to share their message to constituents and donors. Our goal is to help build stronger communities through shared voices and to both encourage and support the growth of local nonprofit organizations through podcasting. Thanks to our founding partners for their foresight in helping us transform the way conversations start. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations. Runyon Saltzman Incorporated, RSE, marketing, advertising, and public relations creating integrated communications committed to improving lives. And Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. In the past few weeks, as I do some due diligence on the organizations we profile, I've had the privilege to walk on a beautifully serene and wooded 13-acre campus in Fair Oaks, visit an incredible equine ranch in Granite Bay, and one of the most surprising on-site visits was with my guest today, and that was 55 acres of working farmland, among other things we'll talk about, smack dab in the middle of Rancho Cordova. We don't want this to be a best-kept secret. This story needs to be told and shared, and Soil-Born Farms needs to be one of the most talked-about programs, educational sites, and organically grown fruits and vegetable retail operations in the greater Sacramento region. You're going to hear how Sean Harrison and his partners have grown the vision, the dream, to what it is today and how they have so much more in store. How often do you get to visit the organization you're speaking with, eat wholesome organic food that was grown in the dirt you're standing on, and overlook both neighborhoods and the Sacramento riverfront at the same time? Based on what you're going to learn, this may be the only place in the country where that happens. And one of the people that have gotten it to this point is the founder and co-director sitting with me, Sean Harrison. Sean, welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network.
Thanks for having me.
We are so excited because there's so much that you do that is unique to the community and very different from the other nonprofits that we speak with. I mean, I've got so many more questions than we do time, but let's get started on the genesis of the farm, because originally it was a commercial venture that you had started out with that morphed into what it is today. Can you take us back to the beginning, what you were thinking?
Yeah, I wouldn't think that it was, so we think about the business model, it was really about the intent, right? This takes us back a spell. We started the project 24 years ago, almost 25 now. And so that puts me at like about 28 years old, something like that, right?
And I have to say, it's very unique that we get to speak with not only somebody that's been with their own organization for 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 years. 24 is incredible.
Yeah.
But you're also the co-founder.
Yeah.
So from its orientation, which is really neat because the history and the intellectual equity you've got on the organization is just, it's unlike anything else we've seen.
When you think about the arc of someone's life, the seedling for this actually started when I was like 21 years old.
Good choice of words.
Yeah. And so it is a fairly unique situation to be in the place that I find myself in and the other co-founders. But what's fascinating about it is that, when you look at the arc of one's life, I mean, there's a lot of things that fortunately came into my, sort of reality as a young man. And I got to see some pretty profound examples of what good community development work might look like. And within the context of the work that actually could appeal to me, right? I like to be outside. I grew up playing along the American River. When I was a kid, it was very much more rural feeling than it is today. And so as a young man, I was exposed to a couple examples. One in particular, down when I was going to school at UC Santa Barbara, it was an urban farm and education center. And I did my first apprenticeship. So that was like in 1992. And I was like, oh, this is pretty, they're working with Latino families. They're doing really cool stuff. And then down the street, there was actually one of the first real urban farm projects in the country, a place called Fairview Gardens. This guy named Michael Abelman started. So I got like two just happenstance examples of what urban agriculture was. I didn't even know what it was, right? But it captured all these elements. I'm like, ooh, that just kind of sunk in. Mm-hmm. And then I started getting, doing apprenticeships and, finished my undergraduate work, went to college.
In what?
So funny enough, my undergraduate work was actually in public policy.
Okay.
And environmental kind of related issues. And then as I started to kind of get into urban agriculture and some of that more hands-on training, I was like, oh, this is kind of an interesting little twist on things. And so I started following that. And then I did a program at UC Santa Cruz in agroecology. And then I went and did graduate work at UC Davis in international ag development and community development. So did master's programs there. Finished the ag one, never finished the community development one. But, really
but you are finishing it. It's sustainable.
It's all
you're doing it every day.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So but by about 97, the idea for the farm had already been hatched. We just didn't know where it was going to be.
Okay.
So we started looking for, the place that could support sort of, regardless again of business model, a place where we could put a farm in the city. Mm-hmm. The other co-founder at the time was from LA. I'm like, well, I'm not going to LA. And he didn't want to be down there anyways. And so Sacramento became the natural choice. But we even looked as far afield as New Mexico at one point.
Wow.
Because, we had a relationship there. But we landed on Sacramento. And so basically back in 2000 when we started the project, it was myself and another guy named Marco Franciosa. And we were just looking for a place where we could see if we were cut out to be farmers, but put an urban farm in a location to see what the receptivity to it would be, right? And so we were looking for a combination of potential amenities, if you want to call it. So, like accessible to a diverse population and things of that nature. And we stumbled upon a property off of Hurley Way. So Watt Avenue, this is an art and arcade part of Sacramento.
Definitely in the city.
It's in the city.
Definitely in the city.
For sure. Yeah. And it was just this little 3-acre property that was owned by this woman named Elizabeth Collins. She'd lived there for like 50 years. But she was kind of like the matriarch. She owned the property. So we climbed over the fence and dug around. The property, which fronts on Hurley Way, it's like really close to Hurley and Morse Avenue, if you're familiar with Sacramento. Right.
And for some, they know that that's not far from the old kitchen,
yeah,
Randall Selland's place.
One of the sort of old guard, like early innovator, chefs and chef families in Sacramento. The Selland's family had started a place called The Kitchen, which is literally right down the street. And Randall probably doesn't like to draw, but it's part of his story. It was a nondescript building, right? And, questionable location, I would say.
Right.
But had built a reputation as one of the finest and most unique dining experiences in Sacramento. We just happened to be right down the street. And there's a whole story about our early sort of relationship with Randall that I would be fun mentioning it at some point.
But true to Sacramento's image today of literally farm to fork.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Back in the day.
2000, 2001?
This is pre-farm to fork. Yeah. I mean, as it turned out, once we kind of landed on the property, and then we actually became certified organic in 2002.
And how did you end up landing on the property?
Yeah, so we climbed over the fence and dug around, and the first characteristic we were looking for is is this good soil?
How's the soil?
All that kind of stuff. I mean, and so it checked that box. And then and we have a lot of people that really experienced the farm in those early days at this location, but so it had some interesting characteristics, right? Manageable. It was 3 acres, good soil, right next to a school, right next to a senior center. And we're like, this is the place to do it. And so we got it literally, got a piece of paper out, wrote a handwritten note, and put it in the lady's mailbox. And she called us like the next day. And I think we had said something on the note like, hey, we were poking around and we'd really love to grow some food on your property. And would you allow us to do that in exchange for some food each week? And to Elizabeth's testament, most normal person would just throw that away and say, who are these crazy people? But she called us, and she was kind of an adventurous spirit. I mean, really, as it turned out, she was a Juilliard-trained pianist. She was a free spirit. She had gone through multiple sort of incarnations of her sort of working life, and she was in a place where, like, it just sounded like the perfect thing. So
I would say, what a great match.
It was a match made in heaven, and so she gave us the green light, and pretty quickly we basically took over that place, right? I mean, it just became the whole energy of that place became an urban farm and education center. And so during that first 2 years or so, that arc of 2000 to 2002, we were a for-profit business. But very quickly, we answered a couple questions to ourselves. One was, are we cut out to do this? Mm-hmm. And the second was, are people interested in it? And both of them were just an absolute yes. We loved it. And the sort of the response that we got from the community and the articles that started to be written and the volunteers that would show up. And I mean, it was fairly unexpected as far as and so we started to dream about the next possibilities, what could happen. And that's when we actually connected with our third co-founder, which was Janet Zeller, who at the time was working at the Sacramento Natural Foods Co-op. They helped us. In fact, it was Janet that helped us behind the scenes, unbeknownst to us, to get our first organic certification. They did a cost share with us at the co-op. And when Marco and I really realized that we wanted to do this and it seemed possible, we reached out to the co-op first. And we said, hey, can we sit down and have a conversation with you guys and maybe get access to your members? Because they, essentially represented sustainable agriculture.
Right.
And were an institution in the community. And they resoundingly, said, yeah, let's sit down. I mean, to their credit, we walked in, two young guys, totally idealistic. The general manager, the marketing manager, the produce manager. We walk in and all these people are around the table because apparently they had been kind of waiting for something like this. They wanted to do something like this.
And you're just probably coming in right off the farm going, hey, we just want to talk with you. There's no presentation, no PowerPoint. There's nothing formal here.
Nothing. No. It was all, enthusiasm and idealism and hard work. But there was a realism to it. We had been doing it for 2 years, really.
And you were producing product that they were receiving, correct?
We had started selling to the co-op, and we were doing a farmer's market down under the bridge. The guy named Dan Best runs our farmer's markets in Sacramento. We were doing that. And as it turned out, when we became certified organic, we were actually, as far as I know, and I've said this many times, we were the first certified organic, certainly urban farm in Sacramento, but I think we were the first certified organic farm in Sacramento back in 2002. Even though we're growing a lot of food as a community, organic wasn't really a thing yet. A lot of great organic production like in the Cape Bay Valley, the Full Belly Farms and all those folks, but not here yet. So we kind of became this voice, and even in those early days when we have no idea what we were doing, of sort of the wave was starting to form for an appetite form for this idea of local and organic. And certainly it was in the thick of the whole obesity awareness, oh my God, we've got a problem on our hands. And so we kind of started to catch and actually help form a little bit of a wave in Sacramento that has grown over the years. And I think that Soilborn has been a big part of that, the evolution, the forming of that kind of groundswell in our community. As we became more settled in our commitment to a much longer arc of this work, right? It's we could begin to dream a little bit more about what the project could be.
Could look like.
Yeah, and so when that realization set in, we started to really think about what is our business model? What are we really trying to do? And that's when Janet, myself, and Marco really began to sit down and dream it up together, which ultimately, we worked with some consultants on this, led us to the nonprofit business model. So Marco and I relinquished control of the Soil-Born Farms and became Soil-Born Farm Urban Agriculture and Education Project.
Okay.
So we officially became a nonprofit in 2004.
But you were already heading down that path anyhow.
We were
because you mentioned education in the very beginning.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I said like the business model was largely irrelevant. It was really from the get-go, the idea was to put a farm in the city to build community, to improve access to healthy food, to get people thinking about what a more of a health-promoting food system would look like, be certainly a voice for the urban constituents of like, hey, let's reconnect with our food and grow some of our own food and support and understand a food system that is regenerative and sustainable and health promoting, right? So that seedling was there. That idea was there from the day one. We just didn't know how it would manifest over time.
Yeah, and evolve into a community-oriented asset versus just a farm.
Right.
So
and
keep
it
going,
has.
because I'm fascinated. I'm loving the way it's progressing, because I didn't know the specifics of the details of the story.
Yeah.
Not all of that's on there. You got a lot on the website, but not all of that. So this is it's fascinating.
It is fascinating when you think about what you're going to do in your life and what you care about, and then being able to have the opportunity to fold that all into a livelihood and then accomplish all those dreams and aspirations. Really, this Soil-Born became a vehicle for all of that, and not just for the founders. I mean, what has transpired?
Which is another whole podcast in itself. Just follow the dream and pursue and passion and stay with it, and it'll pay off.
I mean, if there was any undercurrent to any of this, really, and if you could ask anybody certainly about me and Janet, is commitment to place, right? And perseverance, and so there's a whole conversation around like what it takes to start something like this and see it through. And
I'm sure that trend line didn't always just go straight up.
It was not a straight up line. It still isn't. I mean, it's very much, a test of
fortitude.
100%. I can think of many words. That's one of them for sure. Yeah.
So you've got that 3.5 acres. It has now gotten some recognition. You're sitting in front of the co-op board. What happens there?
Well, so at that point, funny enough, is it sort of cemented a relationship with the Sacramento co-op as far as a customer. But what it also did was that it opened this door up where we started to have community meetings in their learning center to really pitch the idea of a community farm and education center in Sacramento. And so it was out of some of those early conversations where we recruited some of our most dedicated volunteers and honestly customers and donors and like-minded sort of creative thinkers. And so over the course of a couple of years, we sat down, we got access, like I said, to some consulting dollars and things of that nature, and really drilled down on sort of what the nonprofit was going to be, at least from a 2004 perspective. There's so much what it is now that it was there in 2004, but we couldn't have articulated exactly the way it's evolved, right? But that's what happened from 2002 to 2004, and then in 2004, we actually became a nonprofit. And as part of that visioning, we also really did try to envision what the perfect farm location would look like. One of the issues that we dealt with, and this is one of the issues, honestly, that urban agriculture as a whole deals with, is permanency, right? Because you're typically farming on land that can be developed.
And at some point, the value is going to exceed the value of the farm, or the owner is going to pass.
Exactly, yeah. And so, we, continues to be the case, we see this as this has roots in community development as a legacy opportunity, right? To create an amenity, a resource, however you want to describe it, for something that exists in the community in perpetuity, right? And so the situation we were in, we're going to build the business, but the land situation we're in was impermanent, right? It was privately owned. It was going to be worth a lot of money. You could build 15 houses on the 3 acres. It was, residentially zoned for 5 structures per acre. So we knew at some point that was not a resilient business strategy. How do you build aspirations and dreams and trust with the donor community and the resident community when it could just go away?
Right, you can't sustain it. At some point, you'd get to where you want to be, and that would be the point where they say, we're selling.
Right, and there was a case study in Sacramento that preceded us with the Mandela Garden, which was downtown, where this actually exact thing happened. There was a lot of love and hard work that went into an urban garden downtown, a community garden. And, it ended up getting developed. And so we had a real life example of something that we had to, we really had to address. And so we started dreaming of what are the perfect conditions and the perfect characteristics of a farm. And so that dream board of sorts lived of what our perfect farm looked like. And we began looking around. And eventually there's a whole story about what led us to farm number 2, the American River Ranch, which I would love to tell that story because that is
And I want to hear that too, because that's a near and dear place to me, the bike trail. I'm a cyclist. I love that bike trail. I've been cycling on it for 30 years. And I ride past you all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Go ahead, because it's so unique and so unusual that would exist.
Yeah.
So go ahead and...
sometimes I hesitate to tell the story in the way that it is because it's when you think about like manifesting your destiny or whatever. I mean, there was just a lot. We put our intentions out to the world, and we certainly believe that the world heard us, right? Because there's just so many things that the way it unfolded.
Yeah, there are no coincidences, right?
Yeah, it would be hard to explain otherwise.
Yeah.
So, but put out what you want into the world, and you'd be surprised what comes back. And obviously, you got to work hard and stay committed to it. But in this case, we were looking for something that could be permanently protected. Of course, that was number one. But we also wanted a little bit more scale and a little bit more diverse ecology, so that we could really interpret what a larger sort of agricultural ecological ecosystem could look like, right? Because at the end of the day, our mission was definitely driving towards exposing youth and adults to the idea of building skills. So how do you grow your own food? How do you do simple and delicious cooking in the kitchen? Where does your food come from? If you're simply just, really playing the eater role in the food system, you're more aware of the impact of what you choose to eat and the value of putting certain things into your body, right? So these were driving sort of motivations for us, including, being good stewards of the earth. So, a more opportunity to do a more diverse ecology was really, right, essential. We also wanted a swimming hole. I did, at least. Marco wanted a place where he could surf. It's like, well, that's not Sacramento, buddy. So
San Juan
sorry.
Rapids, close. On a good flow day.
Right. And then sort of all the characteristics of accessibility were very important, right? Could we be in a location that could easily be accessed by a diverse population? Is it in proximity to a population that is underserved? And so, we put that on our sort of dream board, and lo and behold, a few circumstances arose that brought us to the American River Ranch. And one of the side stories that I will tell, because it's more humorous than anything, but I was in great relationship. So that our previous board of supervisors, Don Natoli, who was with the county, just retired last year. I think he was there with 44 years. I introduced us to him in the early days, and we were also in a supervisor of another district, but for whatever reason, I connected with Don. And he's like, there could be one property that I have in mind that could be available. And it's this place on the river. And that's as far as the conversation went. And then this is kind of the funny part of our history is, so Marco's father was a movie star. So his name was Franciosa, a guy named Tony Franciosa. And so for the old guards, you would find him in a bunch of these older movies. So he had some interesting connections, and one of them happened to be the director of state parks at the time, a guy named Rusty Arrayas. And we were telling Rusty, like, well, this is kind of what we're looking for. You're kind of connected with public lands that are, in theory, protected. You got any ideas for us? And he's like, well, I know this one guy named Angelo Sakopoulos, who's a big landowner in Sacramento. Again, at the time, I have no idea who Angelo Sakopoulos is. So he's like, you know what? I'm having lunch with Angelo over at Biba's. Why don't you guys go hang out at the bar across the street, go have a beer, and then I'll call you, and you guys can just walk across the street and introduce yourself to Angelo. And so we did that. Angelo had no idea we were coming, and he was gracious in talking with us. But funny enough, we walk in there, we sit down, and we're having a conversation with them, and Angelo goes, there's this property that you might want to think about. And it was the same
on the American River.
On the American River. So that's when it really finally clicked. That it was it was the same place that Don had referenced. And that's when we began to dig deeper into the possibility of accessing that property.
Mm-hmm.
The part of the story that got us to that place was fascinating of itself. But then to come to find out what my personal ties in particular to that property were fascinating. I'll do it in a short, because there's so much to the story. But
it's amazing just the way things fell in place.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I mean.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
To say that not only is it unique, but it's special. It's truly special.
Truly special to many, many people, myself included. And so when we went to the property, Don took us out there, or somebody, I can't remember who originally took us out there for us to take a look. And it was rough. But at that moment in time, I hadn't put two things sort of together about where it actually was. And as it turns out,
you got your swimming hole.
I definitely got my swimming hole. But what's crazy is that as the crow flies, if you're thinking about like where you live in proximity to where you end up working, I was born within a half a mile of the ranch. My wife that I married lived right down the street from the ranch. When I was 5, I moved across the river and was literally like a stone's throw across the river from the ranch, and I played along that whole stretch of the river as a kid. And I have memories of this ranch as the place you didn't go because the farmer would shoot you with rock salt for picking his pears. But biking, fishing, swimming, getting in trouble, I mean, the whole arc of my childhood was in that proximity of the American River Ranch. I mean, I asked my wife to marry me like within a stone's throw of the farm.
And here you are living your life within a 3-mile radius.
So all of that being said, Janet would have, she has a whole nother sort of angle to this origin story. And so,
but of similar interests?
Similar in the respects of the things that she, connection to place,
right.
Commitment to the community, commitment to the issues that we were doing. And so a lot of synergistic sort of things that brought us to this singular, sort of effort.
And now how big is this parcel?
So this property, at the time when we got it on our radar, it was 300 acres. It had been various iterations of farm, actually going back to the 1840s. But from the 1930s on, it was largely about 300 acres of pears. By the time we got access to it, had been sitting empty for a long time. But the thing that's really important about the story of the American River Ranch is that when we did get it on our radar, it became clear that this was the place that we wanted to sort of put our stake in the ground and practice our sort of beliefs and put things into motion. The American River Parkway, which the farm is part of, which is our sort of permanently protected 30-acre stretch of the lower American River, right, all the way from Folsom Dam down to where the American hits the Sacramento River. That's our jewel of Sacramento. And, it had been formed in the 60s as this sort of protected place of which the ranch was part of. But when we stumbled upon the ranch, it had been sitting empty for so long that a lot of the Parkway stewards were really questioning whether or not it should exist any longer, or at least some portion of it should exist. So we stepped into that conversation, myself in particular, and I spent a good year of my life in the evenings participating in a very intensive parkway planning process with a lot of stewards. The whole parkway was going through a parkway update plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so we made a case during those discussions in many evenings about the importance of preserving at least a small portion of the original American River Ranch, specifically as a farm and education center. And fortunately, that discussion, fell on, very receptive ears. And we were able to carve out sort of a legacy role within the parkway for the American River Ranch as this official interpretive center. It had not been accessed by the public before. So it became essentially in 2005, the mandate was defined for the American River Ranch. Let's turn it into a permanent farm and education center. Let's open it up to bid by a nonprofit to operate it. And then its stated mandate would be to run as a farm and education center, but to do so, with very strict sort of guidelines in place. One would be that it grows food using organic practices and ecologically friendly practices. And that, too, is
wonderful foresight.
Absolutely, yeah. And that, too, is that its stated purpose in the parkway was really to demonstrate, ecological land management.
Mm-hmm.
All of this could have gone away. And we just came along at the right time with the right sort of sentiment and collaborative energy, I would say, because
And you had already set up your nonprofit.
we had already set up our
Fortunately.
nonprofit. Yep. We had some track record as an organization. We had developed some visibility as a small urban farm. We were local kids. We had relationships. So, there's a very important, the Parkway is very near and dear to my heart. It's certainly the dominant place that shaped who I am as a human being. And so I brought that to the table in 2005. And if you know anything about the Parkway, is that it is a conglomerate of very passionate individuals and groups.
Mm-hmm.
So, it took a lot to preserve that. And it has many pressures that are placed on it from a recreation and natural management, resource management, and water and public safety. All kinds of things are wrapped up into that, into that resource. And so what actually happened at the time was that 55 acres of it was officially designated as the American River Ranch proper, Farm and Education Center, and the balance of it actually was targeted for restored riparian habitat. And that's where we stand today.
So you went from 3.5 acres
Yeah.
to 55
Yeah.
overnight.
Overnight.
What
Yeah.
happened to the 3.5?
Well, no, we kept the other property till
Hurley.
about 2008.
Okay.
And then we were also running a farmer training program probably up until about 2012, somewhere around there. And so we basically started placing urban farmers that went through our training program at the farm on Hurley Way. So it continued to serve as this sort of incubator urban farm, low risk, small enough, manageable enough to
Yeah.
learn from. Really,
And not to worry when it was time to relinquish it,
yeah, exactly.
because you hadn't built everything on the back of that 3.5
Yeah.
acre property.
Yeah, and so around that same time, we started to put the lion's share of our organizational energy into figuring out what we're going to do with the ranch. And I still remember this. I've said this many times, but it's so funny because I'll retell it. We were walking around the farm when Soilborn was being awarded the lease, and I remember Don walking, and there was I can't remember who was standing next to him, but he turned to him, and I happened to be in earshot of his comment. He said, the person said to Don, "I didn't know the county was in the business of being, essentially slumlords, because what we inherited was a place that was in massive disrepair. There was crap everywhere, and it'd be just fields of star thistle. If anybody in their right mind, clearly we weren't, because we just saw only possibility.
It's
but
beautiful to you.
Yeah, it was a diamond in the rough to us, but it would accentuate the rough part. It was a Herculean effort that we've put into that place over the last 16 years, and now it's starting to shine through.
Well, and certainly the hope of whomever that was can see today what it's turned into and the gem that it's become. We'll be back with more from Sean Harrison and Soilborn Farms right after this. I was in the media business for over 35 years and had the great privilege of working with Runyon Saltzman, RSE, Marketing, Advertising, and Public Relations. We collaborated on many different campaigns, but their commitment to the nonprofit sector hasn't changed since their founder, Gene Runyon, started the agency. Over many years and many campaigns, Runyon Saltzman has been committed to improving lives by tackling California's most challenging issues. Guided by research-informed strategies and insightful, creative solutions, RSE develops innovative communications campaigns that raise awareness, educate, and reduce stigma in diverse communities throughout our state and beyond. To learn more about RSE, visit rs-e.com.
Hello, this is Scott Thomas with Cap Trust in our Sacramento office. I specialize in working with local nonprofits and associations. Annually, we survey private and public nonprofit organizations across the country to better understand challenges they see in today's environment. In our more recent survey, we heard concerns about proper board governance, mission-aligned investment, and how to implement alternative investments. If you would like a copy of the survey or to discuss your organization, look me up, Scott Thomas at captrust.com.
I'm thrilled to have Western Health Advantage partnering with us as they do so much to support so many nonprofit agencies in our community. As a truly local health plan, you'll find individual and family options, employer options, plans for CalPERS and Medicare Advantage. From medical services to pharmacy, health and wellness support, as well as behavioral health care, Western Health Advantage has a plan that fits what you need. As an employer, for profit or nonprofit business, individual or family, you can find more at westernhealth.com. Let's fast forward to where we are today and the variety of programs that you've got. Just so people are aware, we're talking about it as a farm, but it's much, much more than a farm. And what is the educational piece? What's the scholastic piece, the academic piece that you work with the schools on, how you're integrated into the county for food, into the school system? Touch base on that for us.
Yeah. I mean, what we have, so fast forward 16 years, I would say we really started working.
The star thistle's gone. There's stuff coming out of the ground that's edible.
There's still, really transforming a large property like that is a lifetime of work, and we are certainly committed to that. But to sort of reflect what you just said, over the last 16 years, yes, we have definitely turned the corner on the ecology. So what you experienced when you got there, if you were there in 2008 or 2005 compared to what now, it's 180-degree difference. You feel life happening there for sure. It's a very special, magical place. And so when you think about also the organization and where we're at 16 years later, really what we have is we have the center, the American River Ranch, we call it a Center for Food, Health, and the Environment, is a burgeoning interpretive center on the lower American River, mile 15, 55 acres of diverse ecology. So there's the interpretive center proper, which is meant to be this dynamic legacy land institution that lifts up the idea of regenerative land management and organic practices and earth stewardship skills and really is this sort of voice of this is how we can do better, right, with our care of the earth. And in particular with, it's really an ambassador for the Parkway in terms of really caring for that 30-mile stretch. So that's the center proper. Programmatically, we are running a broad sweep of activities across the spectrum of food, health, and the environment. So there's, of course, the farm where we grow food, but the food, the objective obviously is to get food into the community, but we're also trying to empower the community to grow some of their own food and hopefully empower folks to start their own farm and do some similar food production on small scale.
And not just food for the sake of understanding the growth of the food, but the understanding of what food is good for you.
Correct.
It's an educational process on both ends, what you consume, but you can grow what you consume, and it's good for you.
Yeah, and that crosses both into sort of the food and health categories. So, there's the growing of the food, and then there's the what food's best for my body, and then there's like, what do I do with this food, and how do I incorporate it into my life, particularly through simple, delicious cooking. So there's a whole arc of programming in that whole space from K through
which you
adult.
Provide.
We do all those programs.
Yes.
Yeah, we do. We have kids basically on the farm every day of the week, during school, after school, summer camps. I mean, our youth program's our biggest program. We also have a component to our youth program where, and there's a lot of community development work that falls into this sort of sphere, but we definitely have an ambition where, yes, the light and sort of that might go off by an experience at the farm, but we're really trying to get people to take their experience or a light bulb moment or, some spark of inspiration from their experience at the farm and take it home with them, right? So in this case, one of the mechanisms that we really lean on is we've been creating school garden programs, starting with Sac City Unified School District, working pretty heavily with Folsom Cordova Unified. But we work with all the districts. We have an intensive school garden training program, teacher training program. And so a lot of the kids that we develop these school gardens with, they all come to the farm first, and then we follow them back, and then we help place interns and help them develop their programs and create essentially sort of like whole edible schoolyard programs.
How great is that they get the experience of the farm to understand what it looks like, what it should look like, how to do it. Then they take it back as opposed to, here's some seeds, you put them in the ground, and this is what happens.
Yeah.
They learn the proper way to do it. Therefore, their garden at the school is sustainable.
Exactly, yeah. It's a reference point. Plus, I mean, many of the kids that we work with that come from, challenging backgrounds do not have the opportunity to experience a farm or even go down to the river for that matter.
Right.
So we have put the lion's share of our programming dollars and fundraising efforts into development of our youth programs, which goes all the way up to, college level. internships. We have a robust teen job training program. We have 2 academies. We work with all the districts, like I said, but because Folsom Cordova is in our backyard, I mean, we literally have 3 schools within walking distance to the farm. And so we've created, actually helped to create in Sac City and Folsom Cordova, these sort of career pathways in food, health, and environmental careers. So early experiences in the garden, field trips at the farm, that's from elementary through middle. And then by the time they get to Cordova High, there's an ag and culinary academy. About 400 students participate in that. Yeah. So, and then those kids are doing internships. They're coming on field trips as well. But then they are most of the kids that come and get jobs with us too.
And in all likelihood, that would never exist if it wasn't for the proximity of the farm.
Like I said, there's so much synergy here.
Yeah.
The unexplainable synergy.
And you have the beauty of UC Davis just down the street, not to mention your alma mater.
Yeah.
But you have access to the best agricultural school in the country, arguably the world.
We do. And we leverage that. And we also, with Sacramento State University and Los Rios Community College School District, which honestly, a lot of the kids we work with, their first aspiration or their first, sort of pathway into higher education is via the community college route. And so we've worked very hard to develop those linkages. And so particularly from like Sac State has an amazing health and nutrition program. They also have a great teachers training program. We develop programs with those institutions so then we can place those folks in community settings where then they're sort of learning how to apply their sort of college degrees.
Right.
And then the students are benefiting from that, the energy of those new career-minded individuals.
And now we've got that full 360.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave. You can get everything you need here.
Yep.
You can get back into the community. And it's not only is it way beyond what they would ever experience in another city because it's one of its kind.
That's right. Yeah.
What an incredible asset.
Yeah. And I think, again, in the big picture, we do want to create, as an organization, I mean, and this is like at the meta level, this is at the, 100,000 foot level. It's like we want a community, but in particular, a food system that promotes health and well-being, right? And so, well, how do you, I mean, that feels like that's the biggest statement you could possibly make.
Could Sacramento be on the map as one of the healthiest cities in the country?
Right.
Well, why is that? Well, because they know how to eat right. They know how to cook right.
They've envisioned a food system that would support that type of, and that's like where our food access points, what's the type of educational, programming that would support that. There's so many. And sometimes when I reflect on the work that we've done, I go, wow, we've spread ourselves pretty thin. But we've actually tried to play an active role in sort of the development of all of those. We've helped shape the food systems action plan that exists. I've been on the board of Valley Vision forever. We've been working on that initiative for a long time. So that's more at the sort of regional planning level. And then, we played an active role in creating the urban ag ordinance, which legalized the sale and production of food from residentially zoned properties in Sacramento, which before that happened was illegal. You couldn't grow and then sell food from residentially zoned properties in the city or county proper. And then there was community development activities that had to be dealt with, and then programming that had to be developed as well.
Right.
And so we've played in that large sandbox for 24 years. And I think even though it's, when you think about the idea of employing essentialism and trying to focus on one thing, what we've arrived at is that there's actually no way to separate these things out. Like if you're really trying to create these conditions for health and well-being, it has to be collaborative and it has to be, sort of multidisciplinary. And that's why we say Center for Food, Health, and the Environment. You can't separate those out. So we tend to run programming in all of those categories across the full spectrum of youth and adults. And sometimes it feels like a little too much.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, you have a working farm, which is in itself, just by itself, an incredible amount of work.
Yeah.
Your collaborative efforts, I knew they were significant, but they're more significant than I even thought. And one of the things we talk about with a lot of the organizations is collaboration. There's so many other people that could use and benefit who have another nonprofit or who are community-oriented that you could engage with differently to benefit a greater constituency. You're in so many places. I would argue at this point that you're probably one of the most collaborative conversations I've had, because you're on the county and city side of things, so you've got all the legal ramifications that entails. You're in our school system. You're in our food and restaurant, entertainment, hospitality systems. I don't know of any other organization that gets to touch all those pieces, which gives you, it's a little bit greater pressure for your purpose.
Yeah.
Because you are impactful and things that you're doing are changing the way behaviors are handled in the city.
Yeah, and even with our nonprofit community or business community, there's a lot of work that has to be done from that perspective too.
Yeah.
So yeah, this idea of collaboration, it's kind of thrown around as like, you must collaborate. And I remember when it was really surfacing as a nonprofit, like, it's really the buzzword, collaborate. It was like every grant you wrote, it had to have some collaboration.
Seems like the new one today is impact.
Yeah, right. But I think what we have sought out is genuine collaboration. And as part of that, you start to really get a sense of how sort of a network of people can best work together. And honestly, over time, it begins to help you to develop some methodology to, I've used this word a couple of times, essentialism, this idea of really, trying to focus in on what you're best at. And so the collaboration energy that we put into it, honestly, I think over time, when you look at this, our sector, certainly related to food and ag in the nonprofit sector, we've all gotten really good at doing what we're good at and be complementary to one another. Certainly there's some overlap, but not as much as you think.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly have approached partnerships and collaborations from that mindset of like, that organization's really good at A. Let's stop doing A, soil-borne, and support organization doing A activity.
Right.
And we'll really focus on doing B activity really well, and they can focus on C activity. And we might overlap in D and E categories, but when you add that all together, it creates a much more resilient and authentic sort of collaborative environment, right? Whether it's restaurant advocating for local and organic, but they've got an angle, and stores have an angle, and nonprofits have an angle, and districts in school district, we all have a part to play. And I would, without belaboring this point, a really good example I would give on this, which is really manifesting as we speak, is we've been working with Sacramento City Unified School District for the arc of our existence.
Mm-hmm.
And we started working on a 12-year initiative with a large foundation called the California Endowment, which has ended. But that work took us into South Sacramento really heavily. And we, as part of that work of really trying to figure out what the food system might look like in South Sacramento, one of the institutional partners that we really began to dream with was Sac City. What transpired over the last 12 years, which is manifesting right now, is that they have a school garden in almost every school. They have a salad bar program in, as far as I know, every school. And this year, it started last year, they now have a central kitchen, which did not exist before, which arose out of all of this sort of energy we all collectively put into like, what could a better way to feed our kids look like? What could be a better way to sort of educate our kids and expose them to health and wellness look like? And to their credit, they followed that arc along with partners like Soilborne and Food Literacy Center and Alchemist CDC, and there's the Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services and many others. And they manifested what has turned out to be this huge scratch cooking facility that's churning out super healthy, locally sourced food. It's the only district in our area that's doing this to that level.
What a pride of accomplishment to say that we're actually feeding our kids something better now.
Something better now. So
and originating it right here.
Yeah, and for an organization like Soilborne, we get to play in that sandbox now where, well, when we think about smart community development, we support the school garden programming, which is where sort of like early exposure happens. And then we match up what's growing in the school garden with what shows up in the salad bar. And so then when the kids go to the cafeteria, they're more likely to select healthy items out of the salad bar. And then last year, we got a grant from California Department of Food and Agriculture to start growing lettuce for the school district. So as an organization, we're educating, we're improving access, and we're now the producer. So when the kids come to the farm, they also are seeing the food that they're, eating
the very
every
stuff
day.
that they're eating.
Right.
Yes.
So it's probably the most recent example of a long arc of time of how things unfold, and really, I think, exemplifies like really high level impact.
I'm really impressed with the diversity of different ecosystems that are being created all over this farm and the diversity of community that's being created, just the different kind of programs that are being brought in to encourage more people to come to the farm and experience it, and I think it's beautiful.
I came out today to drop my daughter off for the mushroom class because she's really interested in farming and she loves animals, and so I was excited to hear that they're going to be bringing in more animals for grazing, and just hearing about how this is going to be a whole self-contained ecosystem, from the fertilizer to the cover crops to what they're growing to the wildlife that they're encouraging to come and be at the farm.
The next phase of that is the gauge and the diminution, let's say, of diabetes in the system and obesity in the system.
That takes us back.
Sudden,
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be a 10-year arc, as you say, but nonetheless, it's one that you've started.
And that's
begun.
the original motivation, right?
Right.
These kids are dealing with disproportionately with, like you said, diet-related disease.
Yeah.
And so as leaders, as entities in the community that are tasked with creating better conditions for life to happen, for health to happen, we got to think up creative ways to change things.
Right.
And so it's such a perfect example. And I guess, it's still coming from the soil-borne angle, but there's other organizations that have their own narrative around that specific example of community development, in this case in, the city of Sacramento. But what a great example to be able to point to of many institutions working together and authentically, doing what they're really good at to the advantage of, in this case, some of our most underserved kids in Sacramento. And then that translates, if a kid's eating well, then they're learning better.
Right.
And they live longer, healthier lives, and they
more active, more able to communicate or to participate in things.
Yeah, they change their preferences.
It's everything.
Yeah, for what they consume, and that's systemic change, right?
Yes.
To think that we actually can make a difference, you can. So good, collaborative community development, I feel like that's what Soil-Borne, sort of hangs its hat on.
Well, we love Soil-Borne Farms. My husband, son, and I all live in Fair Oaks, and we moved here fairly recently and were introduced to Soil-Borne Farms, and now it has become a fast family tradition for us, and we are here every Saturday, rain or shine, and our son just loves exploring. There's little, Montessori areas where he can play in the mud and mud tables, and there are chickens, and he can learn about the plants, and there are classes for him as he gets older, and there's just so much to do here for the whole family.
To see the engagement that you've been able to get out of the community with what you're doing, that somebody might probably say, this is crazy. Really? 3.5 acres, you'll never get there. Well, now you're on 55.5 and you're into the schools. You're permeating the community in ways that I think people probably never, ever thought.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, in terms of funding, how are you funded?
Yeah. Well, just really quickly, I've never been accused of being short of passion.
But it's what's gotten you here.
Yeah.
And it will keep you going.
And it's authentic.
Yes.
It's coming from all the right intentions, for sure.
There's no sense of disbelief from this perspective to you.
I'm not selling you anything.
No, no.
Yeah, so like many nonprofits, we have a funding sort of, mix of funding that crosses the gamut of donor dollars. So that would be individual and corporate donors. And that represents right now about maybe a sixth of our budget. We're about a $2 million organization now as we speak. But the grants are definitely a large portion of historically has comprised about half of our budget. So grants, federal, local foundations, state, the city of Rancho Cordova. I mean, there's a variety of different grant sources. We spend a lot of time going after grant dollars. Mm-hmm. But I think the most unique part about our nonprofit is that we also are, we've created a lot of little micro businesses that are meant to help self-sustain so mission-aligned activities. So we have a plant nursery, we have a kitchen, we obviously have the farm growing food, we have an online marketplace. Every Saturday we have this thing called a marketplace or Saturday Public Day, and so you roll in there and you can get a bowl of soup and some bread, or you can go shop in the farm stand, or you can go into Millie's Marketplace and get a lot of local, food and sort of wares, grains, things of that nature. You can drive up and have a pre-packed box of food from the farm and from other local farmers. And so, the combination of all of those activities, plus, we do field trips and we do dinners on the farm and we do rentals, and all these things kind of roll up into a decent chunk of revenue that takes a little of the burden off of us to always be chasing, grant and donor dollars. That being said, we still are in that sort of mix of stuff. I'd like to get to the point where maybe 50% of our revenue is self-generated and 50% of it is philanthropic. But we're kind of at the cusp. It's interesting, 24 years into it as a nonprofit since 2004, so 20 years. We're just at the place where I feel like people are starting to see us as a legacy, sort of amenity or nonprofit. Endowments, larger benefactors. We've had a handful of very generous donors, but we have very few of those. And so those are things that we definitely need to put some additional energy into. And part of our story right now that I think is misunderstood is that everybody kind of sees us as a farm first. In reality, we're an education organization. And we're, this interpretive center on the Lower American River. And,
you're even a historical piece of
California
historical
history,
landmark
really.
of California history, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we're the last working farm on the Lower American River in the capital of California, which is,
So take that, because nobody's ever going to come up with that again.
No.
Nobody can beat that one.
No, exactly. Yeah. We're permanently protected and we're going to be here forever. And if that's not worth saving, particularly in the face of environmental crisis and health and wellness issues and sense of community, like a place like and an organization like what we're doing really holds, in my opinion, a lot of things together. And so when you come out on Saturday, you'll feel that. I mean, it feels like the community is out there every Saturday. Families, kids running around, people getting food, people taking classes, going on tours, walking around, just hanging out.
And that's from 10 till 2?
Saturdays is from 8 to 1. Yeah.
8 to 1, okay.
Yeah, 8 to 1. And there are no gimmicks. There's no carnival rides or anything like that. But it's fascinating because that, what we're offering is, I feel like, what people need right now. They need to be outside, they need to be connecting with one another, they need to be getting real food in their bodies, they need to just have a chance to decompress and get away from their phones.
Yeah, totally agreed on that.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean, if there's one thing that you would say at this point, as we've got that listener engaged, what's the greatest need?
I think right now, and this feels like, hopefully it doesn't sound, come across this way, but I think what we struggle with the most is the grand vision and the need matching the resources that you have to do the work, right? I mean, this is the plight of every business, every nonprofit. But in our case, we're sort of at that stage where there are so many things teed up that with the right influx of funds, like right now, if we had a couple big donors, and there's a few families that come to mind, that put dollars into the pot, then we're at that stage now where we've sort of set the table, we've built the foundation, that it would have exponential impact. But really getting to that point where we're not always worried so much about, like, do we have enough in the bank to keep our people employed and keep our programs operating, that it takes away from, really like having the impact that you can have. So I think it's still our biggest concern. Even after 24 years, it's still our biggest nut to crack, really, is financial sustainability to the degree where you can really like set your sights on legacy and impact.
How many employees?
We have about 30 what you would consider sort of full-time employees.
Yeah.
And then we have 20 teens that are seasonally employed. So if you come there on any Saturday, you see a ton of teens. And then we lean on quite a few contractors for things like grant writing and things like that.
Sure.
So, you're probably looking at a team of about 50 people that kind of drive the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And then we work with, hundreds of volunteers every year, taking care of the place, helping at the school sites.
I would imagine.
It's corporate groups, all kinds of stuff coming out and helping us out.
What I really like about working at the farm is being outside almost all day, every day, working with a lot of people in the community and with an amazing staff. I love working with plants, getting to educate kids and adults, and just being surrounded by nature and animals and wildlife and being able to restore this area and practice and teach sustainable agriculture and sustainable living.
What I really like about working on the farm is getting to interact with the community and really listen to other people's stories, as well as teach urban agriculture to the community, because especially in Rancho Cordova, I feel like urban agriculture experiences are very limited.
The impact, we get a lot of support from the community and belief in who we are. The other thing I would add, and you say, well, what's the one thing? I'd be like, I think the perception that really still doesn't exist yet is that we're so much more than a farm. The level of things that we do in terms of really creating the type of community we want to live and work in are so far-reaching, people have no idea,
Well, and you're experiential.
Yeah.
Everybody wants an experience today. You are an experience.
Yeah.
And the experience permeates the community in a variety of different ways off the farm.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm eating something from your farm or not, but the odds are good I could be.
Could be. Yeah.
It just depends on where I got it.
Yeah.
So you are touching so many different lives and impacting so many different people. I could talk to you for hours because I love the stories and I'm familiar with the space. So it makes it that much more intriguing for me. But I'm out of time.
Yeah, we even had some exciting stuff happen yesterday that I want to tell. But there is so much richness to.
Go ahead, throw a nugget
stories.
or two out there. Just throw it out there so people know.
Well, last night, for example, yesterday, we were successful in getting our largest allocation of funds for the construction of our first new interpretive center building.
It's phenomenal. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and
I can see it all over your face.
Oh yeah,
that's
it's
exciting.
Sea change. It starts the next chapter of the American River Ranch. So we're building this really dynamic animal barn and animal program in partnership with the Ag Academy at Cordova High School, and it really is going to lift up the regenerative land management sort of practices and principles that we cut our teeth on. I mean, it's going to be world class.
So Sean, where is the farm? How would I get to it from any point surrounding Sacramento?
Yeah, so we're in Rancho Cordova. We're located on the American River at mile 15 if you're on the bike trail. So we'd like to encourage people
coming
to
in from the other direction. So you can come in off the river.
You absolutely, yeah. No, you can enter the bike trail at almost any point, and then we are at mile 15. And so you can exit off there, ride your bike into the farm. If you're coming via freeway, we're off of Highway 50, and most people either exit like Mather Field or Zinfandel, and then you kind of make your way to the farm. Our physical address is 2140 Chase Drive. We're right next to Hagen Park in Rancho Cordova, also next to Cordova High School.
What I love about Soilborn Farms is that it's accessible by the bike path. I love to ride here with my friends and my family, and I love to come get fresh produce and see all the kids and the enjoyment of the families that come here. And I love that they have live music on the weekends. It makes for a really enjoyable time for all of us.
And yeah, I mean, the main public day is Saturdays 8 to 1. You can get more information about the organization on our website, which is www.soilborn.org.
And that's BORN.
BORN, yeah.
Okay, very good. And if anybody wants to reach you, are you accessible for questions, or how does somebody get to their organization coming or an event or something that they might want to do at the farm?
Yeah, I mean, our website's it's a bit outdated, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And so under the About Us tab, you can volunteer, you can get more information. There's information on where to send emails. Typically, direct people to info@soilborn.org, and then it gets filtered. And if it's directed to me, I'll get it through that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And that puts Sacramento on the map. We struggle so hard to convey to the rest of the country who we are. And we're such a significant city in so many different ways, but we struggle to get that message out.
Yeah.
And every one of the soil-born farms that pops up out of Sacramento is just another stamp of endorsement on what the city is and what the city's doing, and such unique stuff. And you are a part of that. Thank you to you and Janet and Marco for starting this, and for what you do in the community, what you do for our kids, what you do for the education, for our own health. It's just such a well-rounded endorsement of the ranch itself, or I should say the farm. I knew I was going to do that. The whole time I'm saying, don't say ranch, and I just did it. At the very end.
I use ranch too. It's all interchangeable. Yeah, no, I thank you so much. Yes. It's a life's work, and I say thank you for the thanks, and it's appreciated. We're going to keep doing this. Yeah.
Continue.
This is a life's work. I'll be doing this till the day they put me in the ground.
Well, and I love the Parkway, so I will be waving at you, but I think I'll be in the ground a little bit before you. I'm a little bit older.
Yeah.
Sean, thanks. What an enjoyable conversation.
I've loved having the chat with you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If what you heard moved you, please reach out to that organization and do what you can to help. If you like and appreciate what we're doing to support local nonprofits, please give us a positive review, subscribe, and share. If you're a nonprofit with an interest in participating in an episode, you can reach me at jeff@hearmenowstudio.com. If you have a need for the services or products our sponsors offer, please reach out to them. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations. Runyon Saltzman Incorporated, RSE, marketing, advertising, and public relations, creating integrated communications committed to improving lives. And Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. The Nonprofit Podcast Network is a production of, is recorded at, and edited by Hear Me Now Studio.